Welcome to The View, where recruitment, marketing and society comes together.
Recruitment in the care sector is famously challenging, particularly in nursing. Yet these roles hold families and communities together. So how do you go about attracting and retaining the very best people? And how do you deliver a culture that keeps those people in a super competitive market? I'm chatting with Paul Lundbeck today from HCRG Group, a leading healthcare provider, and he's the perfect person to talk to understand how companies can deliver success in these sorts of markets. My name's Neil Armstrong from TribePad. Welcome to The View. Welcome to The View. I'm chatting with Paul Lundbeck today, who's People Services Director at HCRG. You might not know them, but they're a leading provider of community healthcare and nursing, regular award winning for quality of service with a really strong CSR agenda. We all have family who rely on nursing, and many of us are aware of a crisis in healthcare resourcing in the UK. It's also a highly competitive, highly regulated industry. I'm really delighted to be chatting with Paul because HCRG are going from strength to strength. They've got a really strong company culture. I'm really interested to hear how that company culture influences recruitment strategy and delivers great outcomes and what we can all learn from that. So, Paul, thank you so much for chatting with us today.
Thank you, Neil. Really great to speak to you. Looking forward to the chat.
Great. So before we get into the chat, tell us a bit about yourself, your life, your career so far. How have you got to where you are?
Yeah, I've been in HR for nearly 20 years now, which was phenomenal because I can kind of still remember my first day as a HR administrator all those years ago. Predominantly in the last 10 years, I've been in HR leadership roles, in head of HR roles, director of people services in the last 2 to 3 years. But I've always worked in health and care over the last 10 years. It's been the passion. Working in the sector comes with some of the challenges which you talked about at the start, but knowing that the impact that your organisation has on creating healthy communities and helping transform lives is really what gets me out of bed each morning.
And is that how you decided HR was a career for you? You know, you very much worked your way up, as you say, from HR admin right up to HR leadership. So what started you down that road?
So this is going to be incredibly sad, but in my mum's home, she's got a bit of homework I did age 16 in high school, which I think was part of business studies, where they would talk about different functions and different ways that organisations run, and the fascination of HR, the intersection with union and industrial activity, really fascinated me. And that essay I did at 16 said that I wanted to go and work in HR as a career. Didn't quite get there until I was about 20, 21. But yeah, so I think it's always been there. And it's that fascination of people and culture intersecting with legislation, which interests me.
Fantastic. It's nice when sort of, you know, passion and career align. That's where you find happiness, isn't it? Where those things come together. So for people who haven't heard of HCRG, give us a bit of a flavour. What does the organisation look like? How big is it? Where do you operate? What are the services you provide?
Yeah, so we operate predominantly throughout England, and we were established as an organisation in 2006, and we run health and care services throughout England. We predominantly run community health services, so that could be 0 to 19 services, supporting young people and their families, supporting the school nurses, and also adult community nursing as well. We also run a wider range of services, so we touch on primary care, urgent treatment centres, GP centres, sexual health treatment, and we also support the prison and custody health service as well.
Okay, so quite a wide range of you know, customers and markets there. What sort of size of business have you got? How many employees are there?
Yeah, so we've got around 5,000 health and care professionals at this point in time, and on a normal year we'll support about 500,000 people. What's really good about our services, even though we've got such a wide range of services, which comes with its challenges definitely from kind of a recruitment perspective, is 97% of our locations and our services are rated as good or outstanding. And what's quite impressive about that is with our geographical footprint, we've got about 500 locations, so our geographical spread and our quality of service is unmatched throughout England.
Wow, okay. So, I mean, as People Services Director, then that sounds like a pretty big organisation, quite diverse. What does your team look like? What are your key responsibilities and priorities?
Yeah, definitely. So I read the full employee life cycle. So everything from hire through to retire, as it's commonly described. The team is predominantly focused on recruitment and onboarding. That's around 30 to 35% of our team. And that's because recruitment's a real key priority for any HR team in the health and care sector. As we've spent a lot of time over the last couple of years really improving our recruitment services, and then Tripat's definitely been a key part of that for us. And what we're starting to also focus on now is kind of creating the environment which enables people to bring their best selves to work, but ultimately helps us retain more people in the workforce as well. So we're doing a lot of work on making sure we've got modern, leading edge HR policies, and that's supported by benefits, which keep pushing us forward as an organisation.
Okay, I mean that sounds really interesting, and be good to dive into some of those points in a bit more detail. I mean, you know, we all rely on healthcare. We all have relatives who rely on nursing in the community. We read all sorts of stuff in the media, both good and bad. What's your take on the sector at the moment? You know, you've been at HCRG before, during, and post pandemic. What does the healthcare job market look like right now?
Yeah, so I think this is one of the toughest job markets that I've ever known, definitely post-pandemic. So I don't want to dwell on kind of the pandemic and the challenges of that too much, but post-pandemic, we've seen the demand for services increase. You'll see it in the press every day in terms of the NHS waiting list times. You'll see that they're still going up, despite it being one of the government's priorities. And that's because the workforce doesn't match the demand at the moment. It's good that there's now a long-term government plan to create the NHS and the health and care workforce of the future. But right here and now, we're still seeing significant challenges in trying to match our staffing levels through to demand. I think in the health and care sector, we have got quite an aging workforce. We're not necessarily getting the right levels of people coming through university and qualifications to enter into registered health and care roles. And one of the key things that we need to focus on is how we continue to attract new people into the sector and how we retain those that we've got as well.
Paul, you touched on there that you know, there's potentially changes needed in government, potentially across the sector to make it more attractive, get more people coming into the sector, so there are enough workers. How do you think you know, care employers can potentially work with government to make the sector overall more attractive to workers?
Yeah, I think it's about demonstrating the breadth and the variety of career options that are available to people in the sector. I know at the start we touched on kind of the broad range of services that our organisation offers, and I don't think that sometimes people understand the absolute broad range of roles that are available in health and care. It's not always working in an acute or in a hospital environment. There's lots of roles where you can be out in schools, out in the communities, supporting people with mental health. Or working in more different environments, such as a prison or a custody sector. So being able to talk around the breadth of careers to attract people into the sector, I think is really important.
Yeah.
What would be really good is if we could find a way for all national health and care providers to work together to try and make it a bit easier where people want to transfer between roles. So I think the days of a person staying with one employer for their entirety of their career have long gone. But health and care becomes with a lot of strict compliance, and that's right. We need to make sure that we've got the staff rightly vetted and that we're doing safer employment. But that presents barriers for people wanting to move around when they have to go through lots of different background checks and do lots of compliance and lots of training again. And if we could all work together as a sector to acknowledge people are going to transfer, but there is a mutual benefit for making transferring of staff around organisations easier, I think that would be a great advance forward for the sector.
Yeah, absolutely. Some sort of healthcare worker passport or something. That,
absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Great idea. One of the things I love about HCRG, you've got this ethos of, you know, changing lives by transforming health and care. How does that play out in your company culture? Perhaps the behaviours that you look for in recruitment. How do you find the people who are going to deliver on that ethos?
Yeah, definitely. So I'll touch on the recruitment part first. So what do we look at the beginning? So we are an organisation that changes and transforms. We use our clinical experts to build and design services that deliver to our commissioners, that they're easy to use, easy to access, and that they're always improving. That comes with an environment. That means that we are an organisation that is constantly changing. And some people really like that. Some people really like being in an environment where it's constantly changing, where they can drive things forward. We have what we call our difference fund internally, which is £100,000 a year, ring-fenced for colleagues to come up with suggestions to improve their services, their local communities, and to pilot new ways of working. And being in that environment really, really appeals to some people. Some people don't quite like being within change, and that's normal. We've all kind of seen the change cycle and being through change management training. And we try and split that out and draw that out into recruitment in our recruitment processes to try and make sure people are understanding of the environments that they'll be coming into. So how does that play out in our teams? I think what is really good is you see empowered clinical experts being able to think and get onto the forefront in terms of what does a good service look like, not only for the children, the young people and adults we support, but how does it make work better for them? What we then see in our corporate teams, and I think particularly in our people team, is that we work alongside our clinical experts to make sure we've got the right HR procedures, the right culture, and kind of the right benefits to help attract and retain those clinical experts.
Okay, that sounds. I'm glad you mentioned benefits there. One of the things you said, right at the outset was around benefits, and I know that's something you win a lot of awards for. I mean, just recently I spotted you got Wage Stream Financial Wellbeing Impact, Chartered Institute of Payroll Professionals, Social Justice Apprenticeships. So, tell us a bit more about your strategy there, and how's that paying back for your team in terms of effectiveness, attraction, retention. What's your story there?
Yeah, sure. So I think in health and care, and this just isn't our organisation, I think it's the whole sector, and any HR professional in the sector you speak to will tell you people don't necessarily come into the sector for the pay and the financial gains. People get their experience and get the kind of motivation and drive from caring for people and seeing outcomes. However, we know all about the cost of living and kind of the pay pressures that this sector is facing. There isn't a lot of new money going into salary increases to kind of help address that. So what we've aimed to do, kind of with improvements that we focused on in our benefits package over the last couple of years, is firstly kind of listen to our colleagues and see what they're asking for us in terms of what areas can we improve. And I think this is one of the best things about HCRG Care Group for me. We had a recent town hall where a colleague asked us what can we do to kind of support the menopause. And that triggered a kind of a conversation between the people team and some of our clinical experts who've got a lot of in-depth knowledge on menopause. Those two teams came together along with other volunteers throughout the organisation and kind of co-created and co-designed our menopause support package. So that in light of the cost of living included some financial benefits for people, being able to claim back the cost of your HRT prescription if you needed to. But it also focused on making sure that we were trying to create the right culture, that we had for our managers toolkits, guidance and support, that they could support colleagues through the menopause and that they would feel supported back. And I think as part of our culture, that is what we're trying to do. We're trying to create an environment that listens to people, that we're open and thinking what are the benefits that would make a difference. And we want to make sure that when we put these things out, it's not just a policy or a guide, but it is that, right, what is our culture? We want to kind of focus on education, increased awareness, comms and support, regardless of kind of the circumstances and the situation. And then I think from myself, it's about trying to create, we haven't got a big budget to do this stuff. So it's about being able to draw on our clinical experts and kind of create a low cost, high impact intervention. Obviously winning the awards is great. It's great for the recognition for the teams that come together and design this, but it absolutely helps us with an attraction point of view as well. So we know people don't just look at pay in this sector. So they have that advantage for us as well.
Great. I mean, it sounds like you've got a great culture of engagement, and that example of the 100K Innovation Fund earlier, I thought, great idea. I can see other organisations looking at that. So, we talked about recruitment is quite challenging. Finding suitable candidates is a challenge for everybody in every industry, particularly acute in healthcare. And you've mentioned the shortages. How do you tackle that challenge, knowing that there's a supply and demand problem in the whole industry?
Yeah, so we've really grown our recruitment team over the last couple of years, and we've taken the team and lucky to have investment in the team, growing them from 5 recruiters up to 13, and that has helped us to scale. So in this sector, every health and care organisation is looking and trying to recruit from the same staffing pool. So for us, being able to scale up and be responsive to candidates, it has been a really kind of important part of that. We've seen our time to hire nearly half, and in particular our time in compliance is nearly half as well. And that's helped us be fast, but it isn't just about being fast and being responsive. What we've also done is done a lot of work working with our marketing and comms team to try and understand our employer brand, what gets people coming into the sector, and what can keep them within our organisation, so that we can really focus on retention as well. Some of the insights we got, they won't be a surprise to anyone in health and care. So we know that health and care is people caring for people, so having a people-centric recruitment process was really important. So as we came back out of the pandemic, we went back to more face-to-face recruitment activity, moving away from so much dependence on virtual interviews. So have lots of face-to-face recruitment sessions, come and meet your manager, come and see where you'll be working. Come and have a look around kind of the ward or the office where you'd be based, and that helps people visualise and get a look and a feel for the place, which I think is really important in this sector. What we then also do is regularly listen to what candidates are telling us, and in particular what our leaders are telling us as well. And then we try and tailor our benefits and our adverts and our attraction approach around that. So a couple of examples. So we will know, and anyone will know, that flexible working is really important for everyone, regardless of the sector. So we've worked quite closely with our operations team, so that managers have flexible working toolkits that they can design the right flexible working approach that works for their team. And we offer flexible working from day one as well. So we got ahead of the legislation on that. What we also found is the non-financial benefits are equally as important. So I know we've just talked on kind of how we won those awards and what our awards are for, but other things that we've done, such as giving people the ability to get instant access to their pay ahead of payday. That was really important for people, helping with cost of living, through to more unexpected things we found through research, such as people really valued free parking and confirmation that there's free milk, tea and coffee available in workplaces. The milk and coffee thing surprised me, but then I reflected back to some organisations I've worked in where there was milk kitties, milk funds, and a lot of kitchen warfare over whose milk that was. So those types of interesting insights we only get from having that people-centric approach and listening to what our candidates are telling us.
Yeah, absolutely. And that sort of, what your candidates are saying, candidate experience is a really important area for all employers. How do you make sure that you are delivering that right experience for candidates during the recruitment process? You've talked about bringing sort of the human element in, but what else do you do to make sure the candidate feels special sort of during the process?
Yeah, definitely. And I think that thing here is I've talked a bit about our recruitment team, but you can't lose sight of the importance of your hiring managers and your induction process on candidate experience. For me, candidate experience doesn't stop just when they get that job offer, as great as a moment that is. How it feels in between your job offer and your first day, how engaged you are really important, and as is your induction as well. So we've really focused on making sure, firstly, we've got a recruitment team with the right capacity and right capability to support our candidates, but that they can also support their hiring managers through that process. And then we focus really hard on making sure we've got the right tools, the right support in place. We've done a lot of work on looking at our organisational induction, and then also making sure our services have got their own local induction, which inducts them into local ways of working as well. I think those two things really need to go hand in hand. You can't separate candidate experience from your recruitment team and your hiring manager. They have to sit together. Yeah,
absolutely. So following on from that, we quite often hear from all sorts of organisations across the industry, and recruiters in particular, who struggle to engage with hiring managers, find the process frustrating. And I'm sure hiring managers were in many organisations would say they get frustrations with recruitment. How do you go about engaging with those hiring managers and getting that relationship and those interfaces working so you do get that great end-to-end experience that you were just describing there?
Yeah, definitely. So we've done a lot of work listening to our hiring managers, trying to understand what parts of the process worked for them, what parts of the process didn't. I think back a couple of years ago, and we had quite a self-service approach to recruitment, with our hiring managers having to do lots of tasks such as writing their own adverts and pushing them out themselves. And when we speak to our hiring managers, actually what their priority is trying to run the service and get their staffing levels right. So when we sat down with them and said, what is it you want to do? What's the expertise we can add? And in trade-off, here's what we would need back from you as a hiring manager. We came together with a joint way of working that's really helped us deliver results for our hiring managers. I think clear accountabilities and clear expectations on both sides are also really, really kind of important in that. And what I think as well is been very honest with managers and trying to educate them to some of the challenges in the market at the moment. We've got a real focus at the moment of making sure our managers aren't becoming addicted to a particular experience. So whether it's experience of having to have worked in an NHS, of a particular type of service, of a particular type of system, is trying to say actually the market has got massive challenges at the moment. What you might need to do is find a candidate who's got the skill, the will and the ability, and focus on being able to train that, and that will help you run your services a lot more efficient. So I think that two-way conversation with managers is definitely really important.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it sounds like there's a theme that runs throughout this conversation, which is, listening. You're listening to your candidates, you're listening to your hiring manager, you're listening to your staff. Look, sounds great, and advice that's applicable across all industries and all teams, outside of care and outside of HR and recruitment. So, Paul, tell us about the biggest challenges that you're facing in HR and recruitment right now, the sort of stuff that vexes you on a day-to-day basis that you want to solve.
Definitely, I would say the one challenge that I would love to be able to solve, and in the spirit of a conversation with Tribe had, would be around flexible working, and trying to get all the managers to embrace it equally, and to try and think of how we can make flexible working work differently in health and care. When we go through our leaver data and try and understand our exit interviews and why people are leaving us, one of the top reasons, I think it's always constantly in the top two reasons, is lack of flexible working. And although we offer that from day one, although we've got toolkits to enable managers to do that at a local level, the diversity of our services and the range of our services make it not always possible. And what I would love to tackle is a way to make flexible working possible for everybody. We're seeing and trying to learn from lots of other organisations in the sector, where you can interpret flexible working quite differently in health and care. So maybe not always having flexible start times, because you will have services to run and patients to see. But how can you get people with rosters to them, say 6 to 12 months in advance, so they can really plan out actually what they're going to do for the year? How can you get teams to kind of co-design their working so they all input into their roster, and that they can help shape their working together, and help pick what days they want off, what evenings they want off. I think if we could tackle that, or if health and care could tackle that, we could make the sector a lot more attractive.
Yeah, that sounds really interesting, and I can imagine that is a challenge that a lot of people are facing. Thinking of that sort of challenges that others are facing, you're in an organisation now with more than 5,000 staff, but what have you learned that you think, if you were starting at a smaller firm that was perhaps scaling up from a few hundred staff, what are the tips you've learned from sort of HR and recruitment that you'd implement and recommend there?
So I can base the recommendation off actual experiences that I've gone through. I felt lots of pain in previous jobs and previous histories where maybe you design a process or a system or a structure that might work really well when you're doing tens or hundreds of people, but when you start to put in thousands and really increase and scale that up, that it starts to creak, it starts to wobble, and it doesn't work. The things that I've seen that tend to go wrong there is things that are designed on Excel. I can probably hear a lot of people I've worked with in the past laughing, because one of my mantras is try and get Excel out of a business. Using that to run your HR function really does not work. Where a process and knowledge sits in someone's head, try and see how you can automate that. And then I think overall I'd say try and start at the end and try and start somewhere where you can scale up. One of the examples that I can give you from kind of recent experiences is when I started at HCRG, we'd started with a contract template, and we'd had one template that had built up over time. So as the business had started running more services, as it started offering different terms and conditions, as it started becoming more complex, we had one contract of employment that was trying to talk to every potential employment scenario. It had 25-ish different things in it that you had to either delete, update, change, or tweak, dependent on the situation. And it used to take us about half an hour to 40 minutes to get one contract out of the door. So that might work when you're trying to recruit tens of people. We are offering 100, 150 people a month. So we did a lot of work to actually try and say, take a step back, how do we get this template to work, and how can it be scalable by better design, better process re-engineering, and that could have been done very, very early on in kind of the terms of this organisation, and it would have saved a lot of time. So I would definitely say start at the end and go as you need to go.
Yeah, really interesting. It's that mix of getting the right technology, but also getting the right process and the right people looking at it as well. You know, at some points Excel is fine. At other points you have to have proper software. But even when you've got the software, it always needs to evolve to the company and the needs and the volumes. And yeah, it's always a moving feast, isn't it?
Yeah, I definitely agree. And even if you haven't got the budget for software today, getting your processes how you would want them when you've got software will make that change a lot easier. If you're having to unpick and re-engineer lots of things because they've been built around Excel, offline processes, it will make your change journey a lot longer. So starting with that end in sight is definitely my recommendation then.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you. A couple of sort of more wider questions. Thinking sort of outside of HCRG and perhaps outside of care, is the one thing that you'd like to see changed or fixed in the world of HR recruitment, and if so, what and why?
Maybe a little bit controversial, but I would like to stop all of the debate around what is the future of remote working, hybrid working, will people go back to the office? I don't think that'll be one size fits all. I think that'll be very sector driven, but I see a lot of time being spent on that debate rather than where I should be thinking, HR professionals should think, is where is the workforce of the future coming from? What is it they're going to need from their employers? How do you create the right environment? And almost where they work is incidental to where they are coming from. Yeah,
I agree 100%. I think there's an awful lot of clickbait nonsense out there about fully remote, fully back in the office, everything in between. It's just like, you know, surely there's shades of grey here, and the engagement and the output has to be more important than the location, surely.
Absolutely agree. And what the worker wants and where they come from is got to be the most important thing of that.
Yeah. So what does the future of HR and recruitment look like for you at HCRG then?
Yeah, definitely. So I think over the last 2 years, responding to the pandemic, we've had a large focus on trying to scale up our recruitment operations and really create a more modern policy, pay, benefit and reward offering for people. Where I think we need to get to now is we've significantly improved our staffing levels. And for me, it's about medium to long-term workforce planning. Start to think, what does health and care look like in the future? Where do those skills and talents come from? And how do we start bringing more future talent into the sector? I know we touched on earlier the NHS workforce plan, but for me, it's actually how can we grow our own apprenticeships in the future? I think there's lots of exciting options available for apprenticeships today, where you can go from levels of healthcare assistant straight through to nursing apprenticeships, and even talk of introducing GP apprenticeships. So I think how we build that into our workforce plans, how we build that into our succession planning has to be where we spend our time in the future. Yeah.
Well, it sounds like you've got a really, really bright future in a really forward-thinking organisation with high levels of engagement and you know, growing, lots of success. Fantastic, really, really, really great to see. One last question for you: if you could go back to your 20-year-old self with some career advice, what would you say and why?
Yeah, so I touched on earlier, I was that sad kid at 16 who knew they wanted to go into HR, but didn't quite hit that level to get into university. So my advice to that person would be, don't get too hung up on going to university or not going to university. Don't kind of kick yourself for that. Focus on finding employers where you can get learning experiences, get involved in projects, and find an employer who's going to let you study as you work. I've been really lucky to have 2 or 3 employers who've invested in me through apprenticeship levy and other qualifications, and I think that training for me personally has been much more valuable and much more real than what I could have got going back to university.
Fantastic, great advice. Thanks for that, Paul. Paul, it's been fascinating talking with you today. So much interesting experience and expertise. Really easy to chat with you. Thanks very much indeed for joining us.
Thanks, Neil. It's been really good chatting to you, and thank you for all the help Tripod have given us over the years as well.
Yeah, you're very welcome. Nice one. See you soon. Cheers. Bye.
My thanks to Paul Lundbeck from HCRG. Really enjoyed chatting with him today and had some really interesting stuff to share about engagement, innovation, and how that can drive attraction and retention. Hit subscribe and we'll tell you when the next episode of The View is available. And we'd love it if you could share it with a friend or a colleague. See you next time.